Well, welcome. Everybody come on in the room. Welcome to the Harmonize Your Life podcast talk back. Just come on in here. This is Dr. Tony Alvarado, and I am so excited that you are joining me on this Sunday evening. I have a wonderful, um, um, wonderful women who are our guests for the evening, and we're going to have a really good, wholesome conversation, discussion. And so I just want to give you all a minute to call your family and friends and let them know that Dr. Tony is live. And this is the Harmonize Your Life podcast. And we are doing a talk back session tonight. And I want you to get ready. This is going to be a wonderful experience. You will be glad that you joined in with us this evening. I'll be right back with my guests. All right. So I have two dynamic women in the studio with me, and we are ready for a wonderful evening of conversation that I believe is going to be uplifting, and it is a timely conversation. Tonight, I invited you to join me to talk about something that is pressing on my heart, and I think this is the season for us to have this conversation. The holidays are traditionally a happy time for many people, yet there are those in our communities, in our churches, and in our families that are not experiencing a happy holiday season. This year, you and I know because of the global pandemic that we are in, it has made it difficult. This COVID-19 pandemic has made the holidays particularly difficult this year. Mental health professionals, faith leaders, doctors are reporting that they are ministering to or caring for patients, and faith leaders are ministering to persons in our congregations who are battling debilitating feelings of grief, depression, loneliness, and isolation. And the closer we get to the holidays, those feelings can be exacerbated. Certainly, they can be, often they are intensified. So tonight, I'm invited you to join me in this live conversation with Dr. Sarah Williams and Yolonda Griffin Johnson about their real life experiences with holiday blues, grief, and depression. And I believe that you are going to be blessed by these powerful women. And it is my hope that we can share some strategies and tips that will help us make it through the holidays, and that we will find joy and peace and purpose in our loss, in our pain, and even in our suffering. I want you to start a watch party. I want you to text somebody, call somebody, and let them know that the Harmonize Your Life podcast talk back is on the air. Now, let me tell you what the talk back is about. So, many of you know I started a podcast this year. I launched the Harmonize Your Life podcast in March of this year. And so we did 4 months on, and then we took a month off. So in July, we had a talk back with Bishop Vashti McKenzie talking about self-care. And so then we went through August, September, October, and November with dynamic guests, men and women who have been guests all year long, have been sharing with us on wellness, on fitness, on self-care. We've talked about caregiving. We've talked about motherhood. We've talked about balancing or bringing harmony into our lives as professional women, as wives, as mothers. We've talked about holiday depression and grief. We've talked about this pandemic and depression. We've just talked about a gamut of things. And so what we decided to do tonight in our podcast talk back was to deal with this very prevalent issue of holiday blues, grief, and depression. Now, if you're like me, I kind of had to back into the holidays this year. I wasn't feeling it. I was not feeling Christmas. I didn't want to decorate. I didn't want to put up my tree because I was like, what's the point? You
Mm.
know, like I can't, I'm used to having my little holiday gatherings and people over, family, friends, and, you know, just house full of fun and fellowship and all of that. And I was like, I can't do that this year. I mean, we can't have a house full of people. We can't do our normal holiday festivities. And so I was like, I don't want to put up a tree. I don't want to do any of that. And so I was really dealing with holiday blues. And I was like down and out about it. And it took a minute for me to snap out of it. And some of you can relate to that. And so I'm going to invite you to share your comments on here and let us know if you've experienced that as well. I want you to share in this discussion because this is a community conversation. This is something that we can talk about and we can be real about. We've dealt with on our podcast, we've talked about mental health over these months that we've been doing the Harmonize Your Life podcast. And these are conversations that we need to have in our community. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about when we're not feeling our normal self, or when we're feeling down or out, when we're having blues, or when we're having depression around something, or when we need to get help. And so I am so excited that Dr. Williams, Dr. Sarah Williams, and Yolonda have agreed to be on our podcast tonight to help us advance this conversation. And hopefully something will be said tonight by one of these women, by one of our guests, or by myself, or maybe in the comments, something will be said. I want to encourage you to share in the comments your experiences. And let's see if you have any questions for Dr. Williams or any questions for Yolonda, put them in the chat, put it there, and we'll talk together. We're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Twitter and Periscope. And so you can join in this conversation. Let's just have a family conversation tonight about how we're feeling and what we need to do to stay healthy in this holiday season. So Dr. Williams, let me introduce Dr. Sarah Williams to you. Dr. Sarah Williams is a licensed and board certified psychotherapist with a specialty in grief and trauma. And as a result of her own trauma, she is devoted to helping others heal through clinical mental health counseling, holistic workshops, yoga. Y'all know I love yoga, meditation, and creative therapy. And so Dr. Williams is going to be sharing with us from her own personal experience, but she's also going to be sharing from her professional work in this area. But as I said, her specialty is grief and trauma. And so I'll let her share a little bit about that. Also sharing with us tonight is my sister, Yolonda Griffin Johnson, who is a senior finance manager, social entrepreneur. I love the way she put that. Social entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Ravens Project. And Yolonda has an amazing story of resilience and strength. She has modeled a way forward for women who are grieving the loss of a child. And Yolonda was a guest on our podcast in May. And I specifically had Yolonda share in our May series, in our Mother's Day series, from the aspect of a mother who has lost a child. And many women that we shared that podcast episode with came away encouraged and empowered to move through the stages of grief while practicing self-care. And so that's Yolonda. So y'all help me welcome Dr. Sarah Williams and Yolonda Johnson to our conversation tonight. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Glad to be
so
back.
thank you for being on with us tonight. Now, y'all put in the comments. I want to know who's with us tonight. Y'all say something to me. I'm looking for y'all to talk to us on the comments. So if y'all would do that for me and just say something to me, let me know that you're here. Let us know that you're here. We are talking tonight about managing holiday blues, grief, and depression. And I want us to be real in our conversation on this evening. So, Dr. Sarah, why don't you start by letting us, just sharing with us a little bit about your journey and your experience?
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much because it's always a healing opportunity for me. Every time I open my voice and I speak, I give some strength to my pain and some purpose to my pain. And my journey begins actually, Dr. Tony and I have talked quite a bit in detail. So to start with is that as a college student at Florida A&M University in 19, I'm not going to finish that sentence. I just
Go,
thought about it. I'm
girl,
going to
finish
hold
it.
that age.
Listen,
Um,
be
I was,
free.
yes, I was a student and I was only in maybe my third or fourth week. And my sister just showed up at my class and she had to tell me that my father had died that morning of a massive heart attack. And I was just my world just crashed. And my father and I was so very close. And I just love that man and he loved me so much. So it was definitely traumatic. And what I did was I was told that your dad wanted to make sure you do well in school and to go ahead and be that doctor, don't take a lot of time off. So what I did was I went to the funeral and 4 or 5 days later, I was back on campus and back in class instead
Wow.
of taking time. So that prevalence and that habit of me pushing through rather than allowing myself to grieve was a message that I received early on. So fast
Okay.
forward to 2012, well, actually around the end of 2010, 2011, my mother was ill and I went to Florida. And when the cancer was found, it was far enough along that they informed me and my siblings that she only had a few months. So my
Wow.
twins and I were in Florida, and along with my siblings, we cared for her, and I lost her. And it was around the holidays. It was in December of 2012.
Wow.
Um, I stayed in Florida for some time to help finalize some things that I had to take care of, and I came back to Virginia and we started to stabilize again. And not long after that, I got a call from my husband and at work, and his doctor had informed him that he had cancer.
Wow.
And once we got all the details, it was determined that his was also terminal. And he actually did the chemotherapy and all the treatments to extend time with us. So he lasted for about 6 months following the news of that diagnosis. So within 2 or 3 year time frame, there was a cancer diagnosis and a death. And what did I do? I did what was typical of Sarah. I did not take any time, um, because when my mother passed and then my husband was diagnosed, there was no time to even process or grieve the
Wow.
loss. And then when my husband passed away, I took, I think, about 2 weeks off work. And then I immediately went back to work. And I was on this roller coaster ride. And I was a mess. And I was
Wow.
falling apart inside. And everyone kept enabling me by saying they couldn't believe how strong I was and how well I was doing.
You dropping so many nuggets in just your introduction. I heard a couple of things there. You said you did what you always do. You push through. We need to talk about that. Why do we push through? Why don't we stop when we're in pain? Why do we continue to push through? Why do we have to be the strong black woman? And then I heard you say people were enabling you by telling you they so proud of how strong you are.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
So we participate in what in that as a community, we participate in our loved ones not being able to grieve by some of the things that we've learned to say.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I had a cheering section of individuals that encouraged me to just you got to keep moving. You got to be there for your children. Um, at least he didn't suffer a long time, and all these different types of messages that I received that told me it was not okay for me to take time and nurture myself. So as a result of that, I was morbidly overweight. I was clinically depressed. I'm now in complicated grief, and only those extremely close to me saw the torment that I was actually in. There's a lot of variables around the death. Every time we experience a loss, it's more than just the mourning. It's the financial side of it, it's the business side of it, it's the family side of it, and the dynamics of whatever was going on within the family. It's a lot of factors that can contribute to a person's grieving process and how well they can even get through it. And so for me, I had a lot of stressors coming at me from all sides. And I just felt like I had a very stressful job. And actually, I went back because I felt responsible for a team of individuals. And if I was out, then my team had to work more and I felt responsible for them. And that level of accountability and responsibility is part of my character. And again, I wanted to make sure everyone was okay with me. My kids were in therapy. I was making
Wow.
sure they got to school. I was making sure they were good. But again, I was not okay.
I
And
was taking care of everybody but me.
right. And
Uh-huh.
everyone in my circle seemed to think that that was the way to go. That, as long as you appeared to be okay, then that was fine.
Wow. Wow. We're going to come back to several things that you said, Dr. Sarah. I want to get Yolanda to jump in here. Yolanda, share your journey and your story, a little bit of your story.
Good evening, everybody. And again, thank you to the Harmonizing Your Life community for welcoming me back. So, a little bit of my story, Tony, we, I guess grief for us started early on because we lost our dad when we were so young. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like Sarah, we were acquainted with grief very early. I was 2 months old when my dad died. And what I didn't know at that time was that I was really kind of nurtured and raised in a grief space with no language, like no expression of knowing what it was that I was feeling. And so I really
Mm-hmm.
built a wall of anxiety and somewhat depression that formed my early years. And so fast forward to, my daughter being ill, first of all, um, nurturing a broken marriage before my daughter became ill. So that's a form of grief, right? So then my
Mm-hmm.
daughter becomes ill, and then all of our energy goes into just making sure that Raven survives and that she gets what she needs. And anybody that knows her journey knows it was very, very exhausting. And so when she passed away, so in June of 2009, my divorce after 19 years of marriage was final. August 28th of 2009, our stepfather, who raised us, passed away. My dad, the only dad I knew on the earth, died, and 5 days later, Raven died. So, kind of like Sarah's story, Dr. Sarah's story, my story is one of compounded grief. So, layers upon layers upon layers, and really never taking time in life to even deal with any of the issues that were going on, because you still got life going on while you're trying to
Right.
take
Right.
care of all the other things that interrupt um, life. So, so in 2009, here I am, um, September 2nd, Raven died. And so we bury her and we go through the business of closing out her affairs. And I'm single, a mother of one instead of a mother of two, and not really knowing who I was grieving or what I was grieving at that time. And so for me, the journey began because I really believed that I could not process the pain of losing Raven. So I created a way for her to remain alive in my life. And so that's really where Raven's Project, I tell people it's my revenge on death, because it was really my way of saying, you're not going to die today. You may not physically be here with me, but in some way you're present. In some way you're
Okay.
alive, because
Mm-hmm.
I could not deal with, processing that all that she was, the light of her life and her energy that she brought, would just be gone and closed out when she closed her eyes of the temple that she was living in. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how it processed for me. Like, out of that was really my survival skill was, yeah, I wanted to
Yeah.
do something great for Raven, but I also was just trying to survive the moment of keeping her with me in some way and encapsulating her in some way
Okay.
in my life. And that
Okay.
worked for me. But to your point, shortly, so she died September 2nd, and the holidays came shortly after. And so that's really where most people fear the most the holiday season, partly because everything slows down. Like
Yeah.
life, you're on vacation, life is just kind of stalls. And that's the time you spend with family. And so it's
Right.
natural
Right.
to have anxiety about the moment because it's like, where do I escape? Where do I
Yeah.
escape
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this person is not here?
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. So both of you all shared on the podcast previously. You all shared. Yolanda, you shared in May about your journey with Raven, and Dr. Sarah, you were recently on the podcast a few weeks ago, and both of you shared around this subject of grief, around this subject of depression, and as we're getting to closer to the holidays, I've had so many people reach out and say, they've had issues with being depressed or not really feeling really, and we're all grieving in some kind of way. This 2020
mhm.
has been a year. I cannot tell you. I mean, I'm just you're almost afraid to go on Facebook because as soon as you open it up, somebody else has died. Somebody, in ministry. I mean, I've had so many colleagues this year in ministry pass away. And so
Mhm.
we're all grieving. We're grieving life as it used to be before the pandemic. Like I said before,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
grieving the way I normally do the holidays, and I didn't want to put up a tree and all those kind of things. And so, and it seems that as the holidays seem to bring our grief to the surface. Why do you think that is? What is it about the holidays that make it worse, or it's more intense?
Well, for me, I what I observe is the holidays, like we mentioned before, it's a lot of downtime, and like Yolanda said, it's a lot of unstructured time. Throughout this year, with us
Mhm.
having to shelter in, it's been a simulation of what we pretty much experience when we have these holiday breaks,
Uh
which
huh.
may be an explanation as to why you're seeing more people struggling with the grief
Mhm.
because now they can't cover it up with
Yeah.
busyness. That's
Oh,
one.
say
Secondly,
that again.
is
Somebody put that in the comments. You can't
okay,
cover it up with busyness.
right.
Oh my
Yeah.
Right.
God, this is so good. I need y'all to talk back to me. I need y'all to talk back to me tonight. All of y'all that's watching, I need you to talk back. Put something in the comments. You cannot cover it up with busyness. Okay? All right? All right, go ahead.
We can't cover it up with business. And also, we have this Hallmark card idea of a holiday that was commercialized and created for us. And there's this ideal that we need to experience in order for it to be a real holiday. So we
Okay.
strive for that. And anything that's not near that is upsetting. So we
Yeah.
feel like because it's Christmas, I should feel better, which actually reinforces the negative feelings that you're having already. It's
Okay.
like going through a tsunami and you turn on the windshield wipers and you think that's supposed to help you. I mean, just because it's Christmas, that doesn't mean you're going to stop grieving.
Right, right,
Right.
right.
And you hear all the
Yeah.
time joy,
Eh,
peace, harmony. You hear the Christmas songs, and again, it's just the nostalgia of it, the idea of what it's supposed to be. For us, the sedentary time was a dark pit. So we had to keep moving. We had to be traveling. One year we didn't do Christmas. We didn't put up a tree. We
mhm.
were all over the place. We had plans this year not even to be in the US if it wasn't for COVID. We all had passports and we all have been packing since February and we were going to be gone for 30 days. That was the idea. So we had to reinvent what we assume it's supposed to be. But I think we see the holidays and we experience it in a more sensitive level because of the belief system about what we're supposed to be feeling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Well,
and
okay.
and scientifically, it's a tough time of year. It's cold, it's dark. You have less
Mhm.
daylight, and so those
Mhm.
natural vitamin D moments and feeling energized by being out in the sun. Nobody wants to be outside. It's cold. It's
Okay.
rainy, and so there's other, methods that are contributing to you wanting to hibernate and bury in. And then when you're stuck, because either don't want to go outside, and I'm not motivated by the environment to go outside, I'm not self motivated to go outside, and then I'm stuck thinking about, what was and what may never be again. So
Okay.
some of it is fear of what has happened, and some of it is fear: will I ever be happy again? Will I ever get joy back? Will I be
Okay.
forever stuck in this perpetual sadness that overtakes you when you're grieving?
Okay. So what? So when you say we're stuck, how do we get out of this? Because people that are sad, if they're
Ooh,
depressed, I know people when they're depressed who really doing everything they think they know to do to come out of it. How, I mean, that's why I called it managing holiday blues and grief and depression, because I don't know, do we ever come out?
I, oh, I'm sorry. Is it Dr. Tony?
oh, I
Is
was, yeah.
Go ahead.
it? It's just that the idea is that are you managing the grief or is the grief managing you? If
Oh,
it's managing you, then you got bitterness, anger, resentfulness, sadness, depression, suicidal thoughts, poor eating, maladaptive other behaviors, alcoholism, whatever else, correct? But if
okay.
you're managing the grief, then you're
Mhm.
recognizing that I feel sad. I miss, like Yolanda, my daughter. I miss my life that I used to have as a
Okay.
Yeah.
intact family. I miss those elements about our life that were good, but it doesn't define who I am right now. I'm
So you
allowed.
say, managing. So the difference between the grief managing you and you managing it is you being
Right.
honest about how you feel.
Being honest with yourself about how you feel and have those natural emotions that go along when you are grieving. It becomes complex and more chemically imbalanced when you've got all this bitterness and anger and resentfulness that goes along with
Hmm.
what you think is supposed to be.
Okay.
And that's more the ideal and the
Yep.
perfection that comes into our mind that, as believers, we know that's not of God anyway.
Okay. Okay.
That is man's way of telling us what we're supposed to be and who are we supposed to
Yeah.
be, not who
Yeah,
we
and
really.
like you said earlier, Dr. Sarah, you said we have this hallmark idea, and then
Hmm.
I mean, we got a whole channel that's for the holidays. People, I'm watching my Hallmark Christmas stories, and I remember you said in the podcast when we talked earlier, Dr. Sarah, you talked about how those Hallmark movies can be a trigger for some people.
That is correct. I can recall looking at, I think it was the Tyler Perry movies or something, and just got really emotional because it always has this ending with all these people coming together gathering,
Mm.
and that wasn't us. We had the experience, but we didn't have the happy ending that went along with it.
Oh,
And it's propped up by a world of social media, of 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 of, of scheduled and propped pictures of people's beautiful lives.
Yeah,
We don't see the mess, so it's propped up by all of these different systems that make you feel like you're the anomaly. Like, I'm
oh.
by myself in this alone world. Everybody else is having an amazing Christmas, and here I am, the only one drinking on the couch,
that's
right?
right. Right.
So it's it's propped up by all of these images of what grief should and shouldn't be. You shouldn't cry. You shouldn't stop. You're strong because you keep going. So we have
Mm,
all of these countercultural images about how to manage this thing, that when someone is stuck, we tell them, you need deliverance. We over spiritualize it. So it's something that's very personal. And
mhm.
there's no cookie cut, where we may have theories and steps and things that we've studied. Everybody's journey is individual, and every
You
grief
better say
moment
it.
is individual, because how you managed your daddy dying may not be how you managed your mama dying, because
Yeah.
relationships are different.
Right, right. And then sometimes how you manage it in one season of your life is different in another
Right.
season. You may I've heard people say, you
Exactly.
know, one year I felt like I was all right, and then the next year was horrible. I just couldn't get out the
Hmm.
bed,
Hmm.
or I couldn't stop
Hmm.
crying, or I was drinking, or I, was
Yep.
sleeping all the time, or whatever. And so sometimes the season of my life changes the way I
Yes.
respond to the grief.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think
So,
Dr.
so
Sarah could talk about that. I was going to just add, even when you're raising kids, because when Raven died, when I divorced, Simone was very young. So all of my energy can go into nurturing her. Well, she's grown now. And so now I have different look on my family, and because it's just me, I'm very much an empty nester and alone by myself a lot. And so those grief moments still come. So to your point, I have to manage it in a different season of my life,
yeah,
where I
yeah,
had some escapism in the fact that, I was raised in somebody else and I could put my energy into that person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're in a different season now, so your grief looks a little different than it did
Absolutely.
maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So Dr. Sarah, I want you to talk to us. What's the difference between having down moments, like, we say holiday blues? That's kind of, I'm just kind of down, I'm humbug or whatever, just having a moment, I'm in my feelings, as we say. What's the difference between blue moments or down moments or just feeling down and depression? Is there a difference?
Yeah, it is a big difference. And for the most part, if you are having down moments, that's natural, that's expected, that's normal, actually. When in therapy, that's a good sign.
Okay.
However, if it's consistent, if it's daily, if it accompanies severe changes in eating or sleeping habits, if there's suicidal thoughts and ideations or a plan, if there's abuse of substances, and those substances include overspending.
Hmm.
Um, we can indulge on gambling. There's a lot of things that make up addictions that come as a result of complicated grief that goes into depression.
Okay.
But definitely, when you cannot work, you cannot function, your quality of life is to the point that you are now maybe even having the physical problems because of your emotional depression and anxiety, whatever's accompanying that. It's definitely at that point where you should be seeing a licensed provider.
Okay.
It's a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't see anybody when they start to seep into that. It's
Hmm.
like they're already so far in, and they
Hmm.
find themselves either in front of their pastor or the
Hmm.
general physician,
Hmm.
primary care doctor. Like, what is this? And by now, you have a chemical imbalance. And so
Yeah.
your brain
Yeah.
is now accustomed to being depressed,
Mm.
and your endorphins have pretty much got up and ran away. And your endorphins are those feel good hormones in your body that help you fight depression.
So you
You're not
said
doing
your
that
body has
anymore.
gotten accustomed to being depressed.
Right, right.
Okay.
It's normal. It becomes a normalcy almost, and it's debilitating.
Okay.
If your depression and the down mood is debilitating, or you could be a functioning depressive.
Okay. Say
It's
more
like
about that.
imagine a functioning alcoholic. This is a person that can make it to work and make it
Okay.
to open church and make it whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but they're intoxicated the other parts of the day and the time, and they
Mm-hmm.
can't go
Mm-hmm.
without it. A person that's functioning out of depression, they still go to work. They manage to somehow do enough pleasantries at the water cooler that it
Wow.
kind of flows under the radar,
Mm.
and they are the scary people because they end up harming themselves and nobody had a clue.
Oh, right. And that's when you hear, oh my God, I didn't know.
Yeah, I just talked to this person, she seemed fine.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely why in our circle we have to pay attention. And they usually drop hints. When
Okay,
someone's
talk about those hints.
a functioning depressive person has pretty much a very a negative perception of things. They don't exuberate any hope. You know, it's like,
Okay.
wouldn't it be beautiful if it snows this time of year? And they're kind of like, no, not really. The snow just makes me feel more whatever. Or
Okay.
you notice it that this person has gained a lot of weight and they're no longer showing up for family functions, or
Okay.
they're isolating a lot, or they're angry. They get really angry about nothing, irritable, and those types of changes. Or you notice them drinking more than they should, or they never drank before and now they're drinking.
Mm-hmm.
We have a responsibility for those people in our lives and in our circle.
Mm-hmm.
And that a lot of
Mm.
times we're afraid to say anything because we think it's not, we want to stay in our lane. We
It
don't
ain't
want
my business.
to
I don't want to
I don't want to get
intrude.
Mm.
involved. Right,
Exactly.
right.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
But it's a necessary part of life, especially now. Especially
Especially now.
now.
So that says to me that we need to be paying attention. Listen, somebody just put up, S. Watts just said here, she said, I see so much of what I'm going through with what you ladies are saying. And we want to let you know, um, S. Watts 1014, we want to let you know that that's why we're doing this show, because we want to make sure you're not by yourself. You're not alone. You're not the only one who've experienced depression, who've experienced these blue feelings or isolation, loneliness, or whatever it is that you're feeling. And that's why we're doing this show, because we want to be able to help. We want you to hear, number one, because sometimes what happens when we're going through things, what I call life, really much of this is life. It's a part of life. You know, I'm a pastor. I'm not a medical doctor. I have a doctor of ministry. So my doctorate is a doctor of ministry degree. I have a master of divinity degree. I have a master in theology. I have about my BA is in biblical education. I've done my professional work is parish ministry, biblical and theological work. But I can tell you, even from my work, this is normal. It happens. I see it in parishioners. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in my colleagues. Not too long ago, we had a rash of pastors who were committing suicide, who were depressed, but couldn't tell anybody, didn't want their congregation to know, didn't want people to know. People are dealing with mental illness, and it has nothing to do with your walk of life, your station in life. And I can tell you, even from the Bible, there were people in the Bible who dealt with depression. Elijah dealt with depression. Saul dealt with depression. The Bible says that whenever the evil spirit came upon Saul, he would call for David, and those spirits really is what we call depression in a lot of senses. Some theologians would say that Jesus himself dealt with depression in the garden when he was crying out to God in the garden. If there be any other way, let this cup pass from me. The Bible says that he was in anguish of soul. Hannah was in anguish of soul. When she went into the temple, the Bible says that she cried out before the Lord there, and she wept before the Lord. She was depressed. Lord, give me a child lest I die.
Let's
You
find
are
that.
not alone. There's nothing new under the sun. So if you're dealing with feelings of loneliness or isolation or depression, we want you to know on this podcast talk back tonight that you got some women, you got some sisters that can identify with where you are. And we have to, in our community, break the stigma of talking about these type of issues in our families, in our churches, and in our communities. If I was preaching, I'd say touch your neighbor or say amen right there. Okay? This is important. We need to talk about these things. So listen, keep those comments coming. SWATs, we want you to know that we are thinking about you. We're praying for you. And we're hoping that something that is being said is helping you and will point you in the right direction to get the help that you need. Because yes, if what we're saying, you're seeing yourself in some of the things that we're saying and a lot of what we're saying, then this podcast talk back is for you. So Dr. Sarah, how can you said these some of the things when I asked you how can we recognize if we're depressed, if we're seeing that we're out of kilter in some kind of way, we're eating too much, sleeping too much, drinking too much, or whatever, those could be signs of depression.
That is absolutely correct. And a lot of times, most folks think that I should be able to just snap out of this. That
Mm,
why
mm.
can't I just and a lot of and the people in your circle may actually perpetuate that faulty belief system that you can just snap out of it. And you may have developed a chemical and depressive personality for one, or you could be clinically depressed, which requires intensive therapy and or medication.
So
And
clinically, so the difference between depression, is there a difference between just depression and clinical depression?
well, depression comes in different categories. There's major, there's moderate, there's severe. It's like there's
Okay,
levels to the depression. Okay.
okay,
Clinical is like a catchphrase to let an individual know something that they can relate to, that, okay, this is at a place where we've crossed a boundary that we can no longer do like just some light treatment for this, that this
okay, okay,
requires an intervention that perhaps with a medical doctor or psychiatrist needs to support your therapy. Now,
okay,
I'll say
okay.
this much, and I mentioned the term depressive personality because there are some of us, and we remember the cartoon Winnie the Pooh, right?
Uh-huh.
Each one of the characters represents a different psychological diagnosis.
Yeah,
And if you right, Pooh himself had anxiety disorder.
yeah,
Eeyore had a depressive personality. And
yeah.
I think it was the rabbit or something that was hyperactive.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So each one of the characters had
I'm
a
never gonna look at Winnie the Pooh the same
no,
again.
you can't. I'm sorry I ruined it for you, but
That's okay, no, really.
it's what it is. So some people, they do have that depressive personality. It's not necessarily clinical. That's just who they are. They have a melancholy like viewpoint of life.
Okay,
But if that's not you, if this is on the other side of who you really are, then yes, it is definitely time. And it starts really with seeing a licensed therapist, sitting
right.
down, having a talk, getting those evaluations
I
done.
believe in therapy.
Yes, and starting there, and or if you have a good rapport with your medical doctor, you can see your doctor, and maybe they have a depressive screening that they can give
Hmm.
you, and then
Hmm.
depending on your score, it might determine if you need to maybe consider medication. There's a stigma that we still are battling with, especially in communities of color, that
Okay.
it's really, even though we're all talking about mental health, people want to talk about it, but they don't want to be that person that goes to get the help.
Oh,
They
so we
still
gotta
want
move
to,
from talking about it to getting help.
yeah, the
I love
awareness is
that.
okay,
I
but
love that because
yeah, yeah, I went to
we are having
therapy.
these conversations now, and we're even in the church now. We're having the conversations, but now we got to move from talking about it. I hear you to getting the help that we need.
Really need, yes.
Right, right, right. Okay,
Mhm.
so you, Yolanda said something earlier about this time of year. It's winter. It's getting darker earlier and longer, and so can our depression, and then um, um, the holidays are in this type of holiday. Our Christmas holiday and Thanksgiving is around the fall and the winter of the year, right? And New Year's and all that is in the fall and the winter. So, is there something to seasonal depression in
Yes.
terms of the weather, lighting, and things of that nature?
What she's describing is called seasonal affective disorder, and that's
Seasonal
essentially
affective disorder.
right.
Okay.
And that is because just what Yolanda described, that it's getting dark earlier, it's colder, we're in the house more. We're not getting that sunlight that's helping our body have those happy hormones that need to go around and those happy endorphins to remind us that, that not to be sad. And actually, season affective disorder, the acronym is SAD, SAD. And
Okay.
so they're actually lighting instruments that you
Seasonal.
can buy
Yeah. Sad.
and you
Yeah.
can
I
plug
got
in
it.
them. Yes,
Uh-huh.
artificial sunlight that you can put in your house, and it will help you
Artificial
experience.
sunlight. Okay. And I know a friend of mine moved to Alaska not too long ago,
Mhm.
and she talked about how she went and got one of those lights because I know in that part of the country it's darker, longer, and so and people, a lot of people in that part of the country deal with depression. A lot of people in places, other parts of the
Mhm.
country like Seattle, where it rains a lot and things of that nature, they deal a lot with depression. They have to fight those feelings of depression because I do believe that there's something to the barometric
Mhm.
pressure in the air and things of that nature that contribute to our feelings and
Mm-hmm.
our emotions. Yeah. So listen, there's a
Absolutely.
couple of people putting here. Someone put here in right standing, put so very true. There is a stigma. So there's a stigma. Let's talk about how we break that stigma in our community. Can one of us, Yolanda, you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is just in moments like this and sharing, right? So for myself, I'm very vocal about, what it took for me to overcome and continue to overcome grief, because grief is just, like you said, a life moment. If you live long enough, you're going to experience it in one way or the other. You're going to lose
Right.
somebody or lose a job or lose a marriage or lose a business. Um, and so for me, it's being open to say, yes, I needed all of that. I needed um, a medical doctor because I needed some medicine to help me to be
Mm-hmm.
able to function and think straight, so that I could work through my psychological challenges and emotional challenges that I was having. Um, I needed physical exercise, a routine of physical exercise, and to monitor how much alcohol I was consuming and allowing myself to do behaviors that were not healthy for me, or even healthy behaviors that became a vice for
Mm-hmm.
me to cope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part for me, because just my spiritual being, because oftentimes in our spiritual spaces we don't acknowledge that we are physical beings and that everything isn't answered by prayer alone. So
Yeah.
prayer,
Yeah.
yes, coupled with counseling, coupled with medicine, coupled with exercise, and then for me, coupled with remembering. So when I talk
Oh,
about
talk
Raven
about that,
Project,
Yolanda.
because in Western culture, we're taught to forget and move on, and not necessarily forget, but just move on. Move on from that. It happened. They're gone. Move on. But really, it's counter, it's antithetical to me as a Christian, because I'm taught to remember. Jesus said, "As
Right.
often you do this, do it in remembrance of me." And you see throughout the Bible, people creating memorials when they encounter God, or memorials for people who've gone on. You see that a lot in the Catholic Church. They do a lot of memorialization of people that have gone on, and they remember.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
remembering really is healing. We work to
Yes.
forget, but I've been healed through remembering, through taking
Oh,
the moment to
Yolanda.
cry
That
and
is
letting
so
that
good.
moment come up and letting that moment capture my heart of Raven's smile
Yes.
or something she
Yes.
said funny and talking about it. Like
Yeah.
I talk about her so people aren't afraid to talk about her to me. So it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, don't talk about Raven because she gonna cry. I mean, I may, but talk about her because that brings me joy, right?
Yeah.
So
That
a
remembering.
mission to remember. We're not meant to. I don't want to forget her. And
Right.
I don't want to forget folks that have gone on. So I find joy, and in time when you get to the family reunion and you had that time where you talk about, oh, grandma used to do this, and everybody has a good
Yeah.
laugh about it.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
journey comes as you constantly give people permission to remember and to not
Permission to
be so
remember.
um, sensitive around permission to remember that person and say good things and speak well of continue to eulogize those that have gone. So it's a lot of things that, for me, that created a formula. And even, during COVID, I had to adjust because I also used travel as a form of escape. I couldn't travel in COVID. So I started a garden. I had to do something. So I started touching nature
Yeah.
in a way that's brought healing, you know, to my life, just playing with the earth. And so as you modify as you grow and you modify as time goes on. And I would encourage anybody that's going through this, don't be, and the last thing I would say is to give, right? The best way to remember is giving. So in this
Yeah.
season of giving to somebody, give your loved one's favorite gift to somebody who needs it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do it through education and scholarship because it was Raven's thing. So that empowers me. It helps me remember her. It brings me joy every time I give a scholarship in her name. But it doesn't have to be that big. It could be dropping off a toy or dropping it to the neighbor or doing something in that way that connects you and the person that's left with the living. So
Yeah.
giving is one of the biggest, gifts you can give to yourself and to your loved one during this time.
Yeah. And Yolanda, you said something earlier that I want to expand grief because you said it's not just in losing loved ones. That's what we think about when we first that's our main thought when we talk about grief is someone's passed away, someone died, and we know that is a major a reason we grieve. But the grief takes on different forms, and so we've lost
Mm-hmm.
loss in and of itself is something that we experience, whether it's jobs, the loss of health, the loss of relationships, whether they died or not. Sometimes it's broken relationships, and there are things that we lose
Mm-hmm.
in life that we grieve. And I think giving ourselves permission to grieve and giving others permission to grieve is so important. I love what you said about remembering and giving yourself permission, and us giving people in our community permission to remember those who have passed away. I said to a friend yesterday, she had gone to an event where they were honoring her son, and I said, may you continue to celebrate the memory of your child, of your son, because we don't want to just forget.
No.
We want
No.
to remember, and there should be something healing in that. I know it may be painful at times, but yet there's something in it that should be cathartic and healing. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Um, um, somebody just said here, good insight on remembrance, food for thought,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
good insight.
Yeah.
Someone else says
Yeah. Because
says
we
true. We have to
run.
take.
We That's what
Go ahead, go ahead, Yolanda.
that's what we're running from, right? It's that moment of grief that person captures your heart and you feel sad. And so it's like, let me get up and run. Let me anesthetize it. Let me not feel that. But it's meant for you to feel it. It's intended for you to feel it.
This
And that
brings up.
moment, go ahead, Dr. Sarah.
No, I don't want. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm sorry. I can wait. I thought
I
you
was
were
going
done.
to say that moment is meant for you. And so what I learned to do is embrace it and capture it and let myself have it and cry, let the tear not get stuck there, but let the moment happen. And then when it leaves, I'm okay. Um,
Mm,
Psalms 84 says we go from strength to strength through the valley of Baca, the valley of weeping. And so there are
yes.
moments where you're going to weep. And
You're gonna weep.
I promise you that healing, crying is cleansing. If you
Yes.
have that moment, you feel better.
Let
Like,
it
whoo, I
out.
got that out.
Let it out. And we
Thank you,
go
Lord.
from strength to strength through the valley
Strength
of Baca, which
from
means we're
glory to
going
glory.
through it.
You're
Through it.
going
That
through
means we
it,
don't
and you're
have
going to
to
be
stay there.
vindicated.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
here's the truth of the matter is grief will have her way with you.
Yeah.
She is waiting on you. She ain't going nowhere, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. She's
You can't
waiting for
run
that
from
moment.
grief. That's right.
And so you're just delaying the moment because you can't escape it. That's why
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always trying to break through. It's like, come on, let's have it. Let's have it. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I just surrendered to it and said, have it. And even now, I have moments where Raven brings comes in my heart. The other day, my grandmama invaded my heart, and I let her come and have her moment, and then she left, and I was good.
That's good. Dr. Sarah, what you gonna say about that? Yolanda, somebody say yes, Yolanda Griffin Johnson. Crying is healing.
That's
Somebody else just
It's healing.
grief will have her way with you. That's powerful. You can't run from grief.
mm-mm.
Grief is
It's
going to
true.
come. And I said this to someone.
No, no.
You can run, but it will catch up
It
with you.
will
It may be
catch you.
5 years, 10 years. Grief will find you. It will catch up
She
with
will
you.
find you.
And
She's
we need
waiting
to
on
let
you.
grief have her way. I
Hmm.
love that. I love the way you personify grief. Yes. Let her have her way.
Hmm.
Like wisdom, you know?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Dr. Sarah, what you want to say about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, for instance, I facilitate a lot of grief workshops and coaching and things like that. And I tell people when I start out, I say, don't do what I did. I am the poster child for
Hmm.
what not to do when you're grieving. By God's grace and
Hmm.
mercy, I'm able to stand in front of you and share my experience with you as a
Bless you.
survivor of what you should not do, because my grief was destroying me from the inside out.
Hmm.
Wow.
So, and
Wow.
by going around it, rather than what Yolanda said, you're going through it, I was going around it. And I had all the tools
Hmm.
and all the blessings from society to go
Oh,
right on with the way I was doing things. That means
Yep,
keep up with
yep.
the job, get a promotion, got another degree, kept teaching, even entered a relationship at one point. I
Mm.
did all those things rather than sitting there and being still and allowing, as Yolanda said, allowing grief to have its way with me, because I was so afraid that if I sat still,
woo.
that it was going to catch up with me and I was going to really feel what I really needed to feel.
And it's
Oh,
painful. It's
woo.
painful. It
And I
hurts.
didn't want to do that. It's ugly, it's painful, there's nothing pretty
Hurt.
about it. And there was a part of me that needed to have those experiences.
Oh
And
my God.
all
Yeah.
the anger, the sadness, the fear, because when he passed away,
Mm.
when my husband passed, and my mother too, I lost security. I had
Oh,
twins that both have
Yes.
special needs, and I depended on them as my pseudo caregivers if something would have ever happened to me. And
oh
the
my God.
Wow.
fear that I experience even to this day, because they are not here and we don't have a backup.
Oh,
Jesus right now is my backup.
oh,
And
oh,
I
Dr.
had to
Sarah.
sit still long enough and allow
Wow.
God to get in me and manifest and allow me to go in that hole, in that well, and just really just go there. And I didn't go there on my own. I didn't go to therapy and sit there. As I share with Dr. Tony, I had a health crisis, and there was assumption I had a stroke. It made me sit still. I couldn't move
Wow.
for 3 weeks, and
Wow.
those 3 weeks,
Wow.
whoa, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my God. And then I
Yeah.
decided to not go back to work because I realized I was a wreck and I needed to get myself together.
Wow.
And here I am running a whole clinical regional team. Something I don't know how I did it. And I left that position, and I just needed to just sit down. And I used to cry. I used to take my kids to school, and I used to cry on the way home, and I would cry, and I would read my Bible, and I would pray, and I would pray one minute and curse the next. I'm just going to be transparent here, because I was
Oh,
so angry.
absolutely.
Why did he leave me? Why did my mother leave me? Why did I get left here? And guess what I said one day? Why did I get left here and y'all got to leave?
Oh, oh, now that's
You
real.
got to leave. You
Wow.
got
Dr.
your
Sarah.
angel wings. You got the heck out of here, and I'm left in this mess.
And I'm left with
Mm.
And
twins with
I'm
special
twins
needs.
alone in a city that I've
To
never
and
really cared for. And yeah, and I had to pick up the pieces from all these houses and all these estates and all this and keep my career and then keep my kids together. And it was, when I say it was a mess,
Wow.
but God will take that. He
Oh, God.
will take that.
Oh, God.
oh yeah, he can handle it.
He is the
Jesus.
glory in my
Yeah, he
story.
can
He will
handle it.
take that,
Oh, God.
and he will take a
Mm.
mess like me
Oh, my God.
and transform a miracle,
Wow.
sit and be able to minister to other
Yeah,
people
yeah, he
Thank
and
you,
can
to
Lord.
handle
tell
it.
them that if God did it for me, he will do it for you. And
Wow,
I
wow, wow.
promise you, I don't care how deep that
Yeah,
well
he's
is.
able.
If you look up to the heavens and to the hills, you will wake up one day and you don't know how you got there,
Wow,
Nope.
wow, wow, wow.
but
Yeah.
it will manifest. And I see it now. It was like, I look, and even within my children, because I've written articles that were published about that, and I talked about the date of his death, and I said the screaming of my children will be in my mind for the rest of my life. And I said I noticed them being in a mess, getting along with their friends and making good grades and taking it out on each other.
Wow, wow, wow. Listen, Dr. Sarah, I'm telling you,
Wow.
somebody just put up here, thank you for telling your truth. Somebody else said here, definitely a testimony. God is using you to help others. You and Yolanda both by telling your truth. Somebody else put what a victory. Um, Definitely a testimony. God is using you all. Let me tell you something. This conversation is really it's helping because you all are being real, you're being transparent about the real ugly part of this thing. Grief. I love what we said. You went around it. Yolanda said, I just had to go through it. But you
Right,
said, I went around it. And I think the thing is, we got to be willing to go through it. We
right.
can't go around it. We
You
You
can't
can't
go
go
do,
around.
around
and so I say that with great respect to those that avoid it. I've said of other folks that have lost children. I'm like, listen, I didn't take the method of anesthetizing because I've seen what to do and what not to do with people that I just watched. But I understand why. I understand why you choose to drink other than dealing with the pain because it's a pain that you nobody should ever feel.
it. Yeah.
It's a
Especially,
pain
and
that no
Yolanda,
one
and
should ever
losing a
experience.
child, Yolanda, like you did, that just disrupts the whole natural order of things.
Right. God didn't prepare
Order
you
of
to
life.
lose
And
to
so
be
it's
here.
a it's no. I mean it's a horrible, horrible, horrible experience. I can't sugarcoat it any other way, but I'm saying that if you do the work of going through the crap, there is glory on the other side. If you do the work of just letting yourself, because you can take it. You can. It's brutal, but you can take it. You will survive it.
Oh
And you can
God.
come out on
Yeah.
the other side. One of my taglines is joy will come in the morning if you let it. You gotta
Mm,
you gotta
mm.
open the windows and let joy come. And so joy will come in the morning. You gotta go through the
So,
process of letting it come. And so I don't sugarcoat and say, you know, it ain't easy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm putting up what we're talking about. Somebody just put in the comments. I don't know what we're talking about, but we're talking about managing holiday blues, grief, and depression. And we're talking about managing it. rather than it managing us. Okay, it's real. Holiday blues is real. Grief is real. Depression is real. We all
And listen,
experience it at one time or another. If we haven't, we will, because it's a natural part of life. Someone wanted to know what we're talking about. We have with us today Dr. Sarah Williams from Covenant Way Counseling, Clinical Counseling, and we also have with us Yolonda Griffin Johnson. She is our guest today from Ravens Project. You can follow these women. They are just doing great work in the community. Dr. Sarah at Covenant Way, I want to give you her website there at covenantwaywellness.org. You can get her information at covenantwaywellness.org. You can look her up. She is a licensed clinical counselor. She is in the Chesapeake area, but you know, now with COVID, we're doing all kind of stuff virtually. So I know I've had sessions with my therapist virtually on Zoom or WebEx or whatever, but you can find Dr. Sarah there on her website. I want to give you her IG handle. You can find her at Dr. Sarah.w on Instagram. You can also look her up on Twitter, Dr. Sarah WT1. Yolonda, you can find Yolonda at ravensproject.com. You can also find her at Yolonda Motivates on Instagram. And you can also follow Ravens Project on Instagram at Ravens_project. You can also look up Yolonda on Twitter at Triumphantly Yo and at Ravens_project. And these women are sharing from their own real life experiences with grief, with trauma, with depression, with just what it means to go through these seasons of life. So I want you all to look them up and follow them. You are watching the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host. I am the host, Dr. Tony Alvarado. I want you to know that you can follow this podcast on YouTube. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify. Ladies, you can join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. We have a network, a self-care network, and these conversations are going on all the time in our Women's Self-Care Network. The podcast is a regular in the network. We do Tea Time with Dr. Tony. Many of these of my podcast guests are invited into Tea Time, where we can actually on Zoom have conversations with those who are a part of our network community. So I want you to join up with us, because we are changing the narrative for women of color. We're having real conversations. And tonight is our podcast Talk Back, where we are allowing you to come in and have this conversation with us on managing holiday blues, grief, and depression. So I'm thanking my guests for being here with us. And if you have any questions, I want you to put it in the chat. We got a few more minutes, and I just want to take time for a minute to let those of you that are on with us ask any of the questions that you may have of our guests. If you have any questions, I want to put them on the screen. Someone said, Yolonda, crying is healing. We put that up earlier. I want to just see what other comments have come up. Someone says, I have no depression. I have no depression due to the lockdown. I'm just dealing with it like I am walking from my house to the town center. Okay, so you've decided to use walking. I want you to know that walking has been my therapy in this pandemic. I have been walking regularly. I have a group of women that I walk with. We struck out, Yolonda and I and some other women. We started hiking this year in this, and that was a part of my way of dealing with the depression of the pandemic. I'm telling you, when this pandemic hit, I was experiencing some depression. My schedule just stopped. And I mean, I'm used to being gone 2 or 3 times a month in ministry or whatever, traveling, and couldn't do that anymore for recreation or for ministry. I had a moment, and I had to sit still and deal with it. All right. But we're managing it rather than it managing us. Okay. If you have any other questions, put it in the comments so we can ask our guests as we begin to wind up. I want to give them an opportunity to give us some last words. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Sarah or Yolanda pertinent to your situation, we can put that up. Someone said, someone is asking about, let's see here. Someone says they want to ask a question about unrelated to COVID-19 and depression. Something unrelated to COVID-19 and depression. Let's see. Put your question in the comment and make sure your question is about what we're talking about tonight. All right. Make sure it's about what we are talking about. Someone said tonight, thank you for this extensive information. We are excited to have you on here, but we want your questions to be about what we're talking about tonight. So if you don't have any questions or you don't have any comments for our guests on tonight, I'm going to give them an opportunity to begin to wrap up our conversation. It has been a valuable conversation. I have been blessed. If you've been blessed, would you put it in the comments for me? Let me know you're with me tonight by putting something in the comments and letting me know that you are with us on this live stream and that it has been a blessing to you. If you're being helped, if you know someone that needs to hear this, please share this video, share the link, go to my YouTube channel and share the link. Okay, here's a good question. How or what would you suggest we do or say to help friends who are suffering, who suffer? How or what would you suggest? In Right Standing Podcast is asking that question. How or what would you suggest we do or say to help friends who suffer? Who wants to answer that question? Or both of you can answer it.
You always start with, exactly that. We are friends, and I noticed that you appear to be suffering. Please tell me how or if I can help. And if the person say, I'm fine, I don't know what you're talking about, you can just, make sure you say, well, I'm always here for you if you change your mind. I know time to time I suffer from depression and anxiety. And if I ever need help, these are the places I go, and you can kind of leave them the information, because sometimes people don't want to admit openly that they are suffering to their friends or to their circles, especially if they're that strong person in the group. They don't want anybody to know.
So, Dr. Sarah, I want to piggyback on that question and ask you this. So, if you have a friend who suffers with depression and you've had conversations about it, but how do you know when you're maybe being intrusive or when you should kind of back up and just kind of let them go through that? Like you all talked about going through it, right? But we also talked about earlier noticing our family and friends and making sure that we check up on people. You said that earlier in the conversation about noticing people. So if I notice that a friend is suffering or my friend is depressed, what's the thin line between checking on them or, making sure they're okay and maybe being intrusive, if you will? I don't know if I'm asking the question the right way, but
if a person appears to be suffering and it's kind of on the surface and they just seem to be kind of a low grade type of depressive observation you made, then you can always tell them, some websites or some places that are local in your community that provide support. On the other end, if this person has expressed to you that they may harm themselves or they appear to be really depressed, then it is your responsibility, as not just their friend, but as an informed citizen, to call help for them. Try to get them to go on their own. Say, I will hold your hand. I will go to the emergency room with you. I will hold your hand while you make the call and schedule a therapy appointment. I will sit in the therapy appointment with you.
Okay.
What else you can do? You can make a therapy appointment for yourself and ask that friend to go with you.
Wow. That's good.
You begin to talk about your stressors, you can say, well, I'm also been worried about my friend
she's stressing me out.
Yes,
my best friend
in her world.
My best friend is
might be
stressing me out. Ross is stressing me out. Lucy It's stressing me
Right.
out. I'm making a therapy appointment for me and my girlfriend. I'm going, but I'm making her go with me because she's stressing me out. No, I'm
We
just
go everywhere else together. We go to the
that's
nail
right.
salon together, the hair salon. Everybody knows everything. There's hardly any boundaries if you're really friends. You
Yeah,
talk about everything.
yeah.
Uh, Now that friend may be upset with you and feel blindsided at first and may yell at you in the parking lot, but they will thank you when they start feeling better. It's just
Okay.
like an intervention. Like if you have a family member that's struggling with drugs or alcohol, you know how you set up an intervention? It's
Uh-huh.
the same
Uh-huh.
thing. It's the same
Okay.
thing. You do
Okay.
not want to be that person that was aware and didn't do anything and your friend harms himself. That's
Okay.
at a
Okay.
serious line.
That's
Mhm.
right. You do not want to be that person that noticed and didn't do anything. And I look with like with the way you said we have a responsibility
Mhm.
to our community and to our family and friends to say if you see something, say something. If you
Yes.
notice something, say something. And you got to risk that person being upset with you. You know, one of the things I've had to learn in my relationships with people is, am I protecting me or am I protecting you? Am I being right by you? Sometimes my not wanting to say anything is because I'm protecting myself because I don't want to be rejected or I don't want you to be mad at me. But then it becomes about me and not about them in terms of me caring for them. I
Mhm.
gotta risk sometimes the relationship. Yeah, you might be mad, but you'll get over it.
That's
You'll
right.
get over it. All right, good, 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 good. Yolanda,
Mhm.
do you have any last things that you want to say to our audience as we prepare to wrap up?
So the only thing I would say again is to repeat that remembrance part. And the part of our remembering at Ravens Project is we do have a scholarship, Raven C. Johnson Perseverance Scholarship, and we're coming upon our annual acceptance of applications. So on her birthday, January 15th, we always open the applications. It is for college age women ages 17 through 26 who are pursuing the undergraduate degree. This will be our sixth year. Scholars can win up to two or be awarded up to $2,000 toward their higher education. So I just want to remind everybody if you follow me on Instagram, that's a lot where I post about that that scholarship. So that's coming up. So please share that. The other thing I want to say is this was supposed to happen this year, but I have to make it happen. My marketing plan wasn't going to work for COVID. But I do have a book that I've written called Me, Him, and Him, and it's really to walk out my grief over my marriage. And so prayerfully that will be released in 2021 once COVID gets over. Because I plan to do some chats around that in person because we could have two more sessions on marriage alone and the grief of losing a spouse, whether it's through divorce or through death. So that'll be coming up in 2021. So just look out for that as well.
Okay. Dr. Sarah, do you have anything coming up that you want to share? But as we close out, I also want you to just make this point again from the podcast when you said that we have to make because we're coming up to the holidays and people are dealing with this and not their, how do we go through the holidays? And this one is going to be really different because we're in a pandemic. But you talked about making the not the traditional, non-traditional. So say a little bit about that and then share with us some things that you have coming up.
Okay. Again, with the holidays, by making it non-traditional, we want to do away with this Hallmark card idea about what we should be doing and who we should be. And the grieving process, you do what feels good. Okay, like for my kids and I, the first year we weren't even around. We traveled, we went to concerts,
Mm-hmm.
we saw places that we had not seen before because we needed to have a healthy distraction from our grief. You need a vacation from your grief. You
Oh,
need to allow
Mm-hmm.
yourself an opportunity to feel what normalcy is like. And guess what? A lot of times when we're
Mm-hmm.
grieving, we feel guilty about feeling good.
oh,
And that is the most unnatural, unspiritual place to be. God wants us to be happy,
Mm.
healthy, whole human beings. That we have these experiences that are painful, that
Yeah.
are distressing, but at the same time, it is our faith and is our reliance on Him. And for what reason? So that we can have joy again. So we can have that. That's the ultimate goal, is joy. And so I'm delighted in that I can offer an example of what not to do, but now I can kind of shed light on this is what you can do. And if there's anyone in your circle that doesn't support some of your non-traditional ideas, then maybe they're not a good fit for your circle right now. You don't have to unfriend everybody, but you can be selective about who's close to you and who has access to you so that they are supportive of you moving forward, not moving on, moving forward. Because when you have grief, you have to move forward differently than maybe somebody else. And always get help, reach out, covenantwaywellness.org. And beginning the spring term, we're going to have more of those great workshops with yoga and mindfulness and hypnotherapy, which are awesome ways to combine with psychotherapy. If you want to see me and you live outside of the state of Virginia,
Mm,
then you can sign up as a coaching with me. I have a lovely benefactor that has offered me a select number of mental health scholarships so that if you have a financial situation where you cannot afford counseling or therapy, then the Brian Riddick Scholarship may be able to offset some of those costs for you. So please don't let finances interfere with getting good help.
That's good. Thank you so much for sharing that resource because we
excellent.
need resources. We need, because some people don't go to therapy because they say they can't afford it, because it does cost. I always say invest in yourself. You know, ladies, we get our hair done, we get our nails done, and all of that. So put a little money aside to get you a therapist if you need to. But if you can't, there are other resources out there that can help you. And Dr. Sarah is sharing one of those resources. So look her up. Follow her on Instagram, follow her on Facebook, follow her, go to her website and look her up because she is a valuable resource to our community. I also want to say that Dr. Sarah, you're part of an organization for widows. Will you say something about that real quick?
Yes, yes, I'm so excited. I'm a board member with the Black Women Widows Empower organization. And right now you can find us on Facebook and on Instagram, and it's Black Women Widows Empower. And if you are a widow or you know someone that is widowed, that is a person of color, we have a unique experience as Black women that have lost a spouse. And within that group, there are tons of opportunities to get support. There are tons of folks within the group, like myself, that are board members that can offer you services if you need it. We can offer you referrals. There's a website, a Black Women Widows Empowered. It's a magazine. There are going to be lives. There's a lot of wonderful things that are coming up on 2021. So please, please, please go to that Facebook page and
And you
follow
said
us.
it's Black Women's Widows.
Black Women Widows Empower. You got it right.
I got it
Yes,
right. Okay,
yes,
I wanted to put that up there so those
yes,
that are watching can see it. And there's a
yes.
Facebook page, and just Google it. I'm sure it'll come up.
Yeah, just Google it and you'll see our website. It is a nonprofit, so that if you are not a widow and you want to find a worthy organization to donate to, you got to get that end of the year tax break in. There you go.
Okay,
It's because
good.
we do nothing but outreach, free outreach to individuals that have been widowed.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing
Great.
these resources with the community. That's what this podcast is about. And I just want to thank you all for spending your Sunday evening with me. I wanted to come on and have this real conversation about holiday blues, about grief, about depression as we make our way. This is Christmas week. This is Christmas Sunday. It's the fourth Sunday of Advent.
Mhm.
This coming Friday will be Christmas Day. And some people are dreading it. Some people are not looking forward to this Christmas season. Some people have lost loved ones this year through COVID-19 or other illnesses, or just suddenly people have died suddenly, natural causes or whatever. And so we're grieving. We're grieving the loss of life the way it used to be pre-pandemic, lifestyles, travel, and other things that we normally would be doing this time of year. Many of us are grieving what we used to do for Christmas and holiday seasons. And so I wanted to have this real conversation with us on today as we move closer to the Christmas holiday, to make sure that we can go into this holiday season with strategies, with tips, and how to make it, and how to live on the other side of the holidays, because we got to live every day of the week. We got to live 12 months out of the year, 365 days a year. We have to make it through, and we want to know how to manage our blues, not run from it, how to manage our grief, not run from it, how to manage our depression, not run from it, how to be real and seek the help that we need. We're having these conversations, but we got to move from just having the conversations to doing something about it and getting the real help that we need. Thank you for spending your Sunday evening with me. I am Dr. Tony Alvarado, the host for the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast, and you've been listening to our podcast, Talk Back. We'll see you in 2021 with more exciting episodes of the Harmonize Your Life podcast. Stay tuned.